Welcome to the Westminster Effects Doxology Podcast, where we exist for the glory of God and the tone of His people. I'm Cody Fields, president of Westminster Effects. Go buy stuff for your guitar at westminstereffects.com. Join the discussion in the Westminster Effects Doxology Podcast Lounge on Facebook, and subscribe and comment all the socials and share the show and tell people about it, all that good stuff. In person, I'm joined by...
Hey everybody, it's Bradley Cox, pastor at Resurrection Church in Greer, South Carolina.
And via the interwebs, I'm joined by...
Hey everybody, John Ross here, Westminster Effects artist and Admiral of Augsburg from Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yes,
I told you I'd whip that new one out.
You brought that one out, and I'm so happy about it. We're a little short on time, but I think this episode will be a little quicker anyway. So my wife and I went on vacation to Las Vegas last week. Typically not thought of as a Christian destination for vacations.
Right.
We didn't indulge in those things, whatever you're thinking of. But the overall, I guess you could say, architecture of these places, the opulence of some of these places kind of got me thinking. So I put together a little video of some of the places we went to. So let me show you these real quick.
Montage.
So we've got stuff like the entrance to the Bellagio. We've got stuff like in the Cosmopolitan, there's a bar called the Chandelier, and it's 2 levels encompassed by a chandelier. You've got the Caesar's Palace shops, which are, it's just incredible, the thought that they put into this, where they've got like I guess a more muted, cloudy day sky on the ceiling. And on top of that, there's 2 Louis Vuitton stores within 200 feet of each other, which I thought was hilarious.
Interesting.
But there's just all of this effort put into it. So I had several thoughts about it and how it correlates to Christianity, because of course I did, right? One is what you spend your money on reveals what your priorities are.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that apply to the church? And I think some of that gets into things we've talked about before, things like the seeker-sensitive phenomenon, but most specifically with the fact that AV budgets are enormous now compared to the rest of the building.
Yeah.
We typically say, we'll just make the building a box and then make it cool with all the lights inside. There's nothing necessarily evil about that. So nobody hear me say that. But what it definitely does is tell everybody, this is what we really care about, is this experience that we're giving people. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think and the experience being one of that's geared more towards spectating than participating.
Yes.
I mean, I think all the dollars spent on audio, visual, lighting, smoke machines, even how and I think it is very much a liturgy, how the liturgy is structured in a church like that. If the sermon's got a bumper video or none of those things are bad in and of themselves. I've done a bumper video before.
Yeah. We had a really cool one with Martin Lloyd-Jones when we had the Roman series going on.
Yeah, exactly.
That thing was awesome.
Some of that stuff can be helpful, but I do think that you have to think about what is it communicating, what is it promoting, in terms of what you value the most. Because values are going to be had.
Yes.
It's just whether or not you're very intentional about those values, and if you're thinking through the implications of what you are placing value on. And I think that's what you're getting at as far as that stuff goes.
Yeah. What about you, John?
With the usage of bumper videos and lights and so on and so forth, I mean, really the goal should be magnification and edification, right? Mm-hmm. Those 2 principles have existed in church design, I mean, since the time of organized, post-early church, right? In kind of sanctuary cathedral architecture, there's so many pieces that were intentionally included in the construction of churches all the way up until I mean, they still exist today, but they were more, certainly more common up until, the kind of the mid 20th century. And some of those items that we'd see would be the stained glass, right? And not necessarily just stained glass because it's a mosaic of just random colors and it's cool, but stained glass that told a story.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Thinking back to my parents' congregation, St. John in Clinton, Iowa, the stained glass outlines the let's see, I got to remember here, it's been a minute. I believe that on one side of the sanctuary, the stained glass outlines the different petitions of the Ten Commandments. I believe on the other side it's the components of the Apostles' Creed, and I believe there's some others that illustrate kind of the sacramental imagery, for both baptism and the Lord's Supper, and that's not where the symbolism ends at all, and it's more than symbolism, right? And, Eastern Orthodoxy is really rich in symbolism because there's a bit of mystery there, right?
Right.
There's a bit of a mysticism is more of the word that I'm getting at, where everything they do has an intentional purpose. In many whether it be Roman or Protestant churches, you'll see the pastor in the benediction make the sign of the cross, and even the shape of the hand, right, is intentional there, where we have two fingers pointing up, thus representing the two natures of Christ, and then the three fingers joined as the three persons of the Godhead, right? And so doing the sign of the cross in that manner, that still has symbolism. But in Eastern Orthodoxy, they use a blessing cross, right? And sometimes to the extent of where it's a special one, depending on what day of the church year it is. But we see items like this throughout church design as well, not just the stained glass, but even the orientation of historical sanctuaries had the congregation facing east towards the rising sun, not just the physical rising sun, but the imagery of the rising sun. Because what would happen is we would have such an uphill battle of illiteracy in the churches, in culture in general, and so. Even post-Reformation, where people had the Word of God in their own language, they weren't able to necessarily consume it themselves directly, right? Until they learned to do so. But items such as the stained glass, the orientation of the sanctuary, would all be imagery that would be used as a teaching point. Right. And so a bumper video, it's not just a simple countdown. It's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Bradley. It's let's.
Don't give him ideas. He's
going
to petition all of us deacons for a new dispensation for
Hype
a
men.
fog machine next week now.
I want one of those things that like propels me up from underneath the stage.
Like the spring-loaded
the
trap
spring,
door.
like Garth Brooks style, like just come up.
Nice.
Yeah. I think
but those. Yeah, go ahead, Bradley.
Well, I was just going to say that, here at Res, like our ecclesiology has matured over time.
Sure.
And, we've done, in my tenure here, we've done a couple of different building renovations, upgrades to the AVL. And I remember in those days, like I think the first renovation was in 06, 07, and then we did another one in 2017, about 10 years later. And I remember talking a lot about the things that we thought were necessary and important based on what was going on in the broader landscape of the modern church, right? It's like
that list would be a lot smaller now.
Well, we got to get the natural light out.
Yeah.
We got to be able to control the lighting. We need good stage lighting so that it looks good with the camera, and we want our screen and our projector to be, robust and very clear, and all these kinds of things, and how we used those things. And what's happened over time as our ecclesiology has matured, and I'm not necessarily putting this on anybody else, is that we find ourselves wanting to do less, not more, with those things.
Right.
And
Yes, sir.
even as we're anticipating, because our church is growing, we're anticipating building expansion, possibly even a new sanctuary in the coming, in not too distant future. I'm starting to think more about, I want more natural light. I want more of a feeling that we have come together as a people and as a family to sing together and study the word together, as opposed to I'm walking into this room where I sit and watch what goes on the stage.
Right.
Somehow I want
Right.
the building itself to communicate togetherness and participation way more than it does now. I find myself walking into our current sanctuary and going, man, I wish we would have done this differently. So, I mean, that's just how things have matured over time.
Right, and I don't think you're alone there. I mean, those are observations that I share in my own context and share with others. We're looking at other kind of service options that kind of embrace that. In our more traditional sanctuary, it's very natural light. It's very bright. It's very open. The pews are arranged in almost a U shape, right? So that there's this air of togetherness. With the items like the really nice projector and the lighting that really complements the camera angle, right? We start these things with the intention of, well, if we're going to do video, then video should be accessible. It should be quality. It should be done with excellence to the glory of God.
Yep.
However, when we kind of set our hand to that plow, we can easily fall down a slippery slope of just like, what's the next thing, right? And we lose sight of doing these things for the magnification of the gospel, for the edification of his people, and ultimately accessibility as well, right?
Right.
And when we go too far, I'm like, well, we have these lights, but what if we had moving lights, right?
Yeah.
And it may start even from a practical standpoint. If we had moving lights that we could, during the sermon, the lights move to be on the pastor or the preacher. During the Lord's Supper, the lights move up to to the altar or the table for the sacrament, and those things maybe could be introduced by, well, if we had 2 lights that move, we wouldn't need 4 lights that were stationary. But then when you have it, there's the temptation, right? There's the temptation to do more.
Yeah.
I mean, who hasn't had, hinting at the kind of the musical pedigree of the show, I mean, who hasn't had like a Helix or a Digitech or something that just has this bonkers effect on it?
Oh,
and we
yeah.
want to use it because we have it, right?
I've never done that.
Virtual
at church
show of
before.
hands. Who's used a Boss slicer in worship? Like it happens, right? There's a reason why I keep tremolo and phaser on my board all the time, because it started as something, well, I have it, I'm going to use it, and then I end up kind of sticking with it. But there are times when it can go over the top, and it's the same thing with aesthetics in worship, where something starts with very good intentions, but then new volunteers, new excitement, maybe the use of that technology has brought volunteers in from perhaps secular pursuits, concerts or convention halls or something. They're like, I'll help. I know this. I feel, I feel together with the congregation. I feel involved. And they bring their ideas that may not be as focused on the magnification of the gospel piece, because they've never used that technology in that way.
Right.
Right.
This is kind of a bigger thought that is coming up in my mind now, is that I've done this long enough now that I can look back and see the pendulum swings.
Right.
And now my theology is developed to the point where I feel like I can confidently say God is sovereign over the pendulum swings.
Yep.
And there is a sense in which I think we need to be, in my lifetime, what I've seen is the pendulum swings, and there's resistance from those who grew up in the opposite end of that spectrum. And what happens is there's this war that ensues. It's us against them within the church. And then when the pendulum starts to swing the other way, the same thing happens.
Right.
is we start to go, oh, the lights, the audio, the visual, all that stuff. We're stopping short of saying it's wicked, but we're also realizing that there have been some negative things that have come from it. But that
Right.
doesn't mean that there weren't positives too.
Right.
Like there wasn't some sense in which the church modernized and took advantage of technology in some ways that helped, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think
but
what I see now is I see a pendulum. I think we're actually in the midst of a pendulum swing.
Mhm.
And that pendulum swing includes some people, at least, and I think it's a growing number, that are tired of watching a pastor on a screen.
Oh yeah.
They are tired of performance-based, seeker-sensitive Lord's Day worship. They want more. They want to grow. They like there is this
transcendence.
Yes, just about every first-time visitor we get that sticks at Res is they tell us we left this church or we left that church or we haven't been in church for a long time, or maybe we've never been in church, but the reason we're here is because we want to be in a place where God's word is taught faithfully. They don't want topical, they don't want at the movies anymore. I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but I think we're in the midst of a pendulum swing, and the best thing we can do is just be discerning and recognize that and make the adjustments that we need to make, which I think fundamentally are more biblically in line. They're more. It's a more biblically rooted ecclesiology, at least in terms of how we structure our liturgy. That it's got to be more about the congregation and less about the stage.
Yes.
It's got to be more
maybe Matt. No,
say it
go
again,
ahead.
John. What?
I was just going to say maybe Matt Redman's Heart of Worship is going to get some more airtime coming around here soon.
I think there's maybe like something to that. Like I feel like we need that. Maybe Matt Redman was anticipating that things were moving too far in one direction.
Yeah.
So he wrote that song.
When I reflect on this, and there's a historical kind of precedent here too. I mean, technology has kind of invaded our lives, right? One thing that I crave for our family, and it's difficult with my day job and with the way we manage our calendars and things like that, but as a technology Sabbath. And one of the reasons why those things that concept is so important or so valuable is because we all carry around a dang cell phone that has access to everything, and we're constantly just bludgeoned by notifications and news and this, and it pulls us out of the moment. Everything is fleeting. Everything is virtual. We're not touching. Yeah, okay. Read a book on your Kindle, but don't tell me it's more real than reading it from a page. There's a feeling there, right? And granted, the feeling is probably not one of convenience, but there is a certain realness and transcendence there. And when we start adapting and leveraging this technology for good purposes, it brings us closer to the things that we use on a daily basis, which are not quite the that do not conform to the ways of this world. But going back historically within the church, there were many good things that started with the intention of rich imagery, magnification, edification, etc., that have transitioned into more of a source of piety points. I mean, if we look at traditional kind of high church practices, you'd have pieces like the gospel procession, which was both practical and symbolic in that when the gospel was read, they would process, led by the cross of Christ, as it were, into the midst of the nave, or in the midst of the area where the congregation would be sat, and they would read the gospel in the midst of the people, right? Number one, be able to hear it more, but two, the imagery that comes with that is Christ comes to us, right?
Right.
His word comes to us while we were still sinners. But now the the potential symbolism has not changed. The potential practical uses of that have not changed. But there are some congregations in the LCMS, for one, we see this in Rome quite a bit, where we do these things for the sake of the grandiose. Tying this back to your observations from Vegas, Cody, right? We do these things because they're opulent, because they're a spectacle, because they look really cool. I mean, it's not just if your context is robes and stoles, right? It's not just that. It's the it's the chasuble and the cassock, and like it's this whole thing. You can make yourself into an awfully fancy fella preaching the gospel, but is that the point if
Right.
you don't use that in a way to magnify the Lord?
Right.
And as we look to switch away from maybe leveraging some of this technology, what we don't want to do, or what we want to avoid rather, is leaving a vacuum where we go so kind of anti-tech that we inhibit the accessibility, or we lose the intentionality or that attitude of intention that drove us to adopt some of that technology in the first place. I mean, I am 100% behind ditching screens and going back to hymnals. That's 100% my, what's on my heart. But would that be a negative stumbling block for the congregation, or a positive one? And those questions of that ilk are things we need to seriously consider as we look on how to shape our worship services to be most, to really be most magnifying the gospel and the most glory to God.
Right. On the other side of that coin, right? So we're effectively arguing for purity in the church and in its practice. Right?
Absolutely.
On the other side of that, one of the interesting things that I was also thinking about with Vegas is, why hasn't a Christian investment group built a hotel and resort on the Strip in Las Vegas? And I think a lot of that is because so many Christians err on the side of, well, it's not evangelistic, right? Stuff like,
are you suggesting Answers in Genesis comes out with Sodom and Gomorrah?
Right. I was going to reference the Ark Encounter. Like the Ark Encounter, like that thing cost $200 million to build, and it's worth it. Absolutely. I think it would also be worth it for someone to go in and drop $500 million to $1 billion to construct something as big as the MGM Grand, and have shows and a cigar lounge and nice shops and whatever, and it all be family friendly. We're not going to encourage you to come in and blow your money on slot machines. We're not going to have scantily clad waitresses. It's going to be family friendly, and it's going to be really nice, and it's going to be really well done. Come enjoy it.
Right. Like, I mean, look at all the other stuff that Vegas has.
Yeah, I would love for a Christian investment group to go in and do that.
Yeah.
Be the new Hilton chain, right? And put one on the Strip in Las Vegas. Go put one in Manhattan, instead of only thinking in terms of the Christian life as, I go to church and then I read my Bible and that's about it.
Yeah.
Go make an awesome business.
But something that has more purity to it. Well, sure, but if you look at what Vegas has, there's the Las Vegas Eye. There's a Ferris wheel, I think, and then there's not the orb, right? But there's the Ferris
sphere.
wheel. There's and then there's Circus has a darn near theme park inside of it.
Yeah.
These resorts have so much to enjoy and to consume and really kind of even enjoy time together.
Right.
Right. But there's this haze of, cigarette smoke, but also, also this just frivolous spending kind of on top of it. And there are great things already for families to do, but it's coupled so tightly to the gambling industry,
right?
That it's really not a great example. You just as an aside, you mentioned that it's going to Vegas and for an anniversary or a more Christian mindset trip. I think Kelly and I's first trip to Vegas was when we did a Weekend to Remember conference. right? The marriage retreat
Mm-hmm.
that was done in Vegas, and we absolutely appreciated the irony in that as well. But there is an excitement, there is a buzz to the city, and to your point, being able to start a business venture there that provides the ability to enjoy the city without the inappropriate adult themes that so often accompany it.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a nice breath of fresh air, I
Do you
think.
know, like, I don't disagree with you, but where my mind's going is, um, the the church or the Christian world has not stewarded things like that very well.
That's true.
I mean, think about
Mm-hmm.
PTL.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the place that they tried to get going, and that was ultimately
The theme park in Rock Hill.
the theme park. Yeah. Jim Baker's downfall was that, he was, trying to raise all this money, and then he was trying to get investors to buy in, and he was overselling things that he didn't have. And it just became this stewardship issue, and it just didn't work. And it ultimately came, like I've been there to that. What was that place
I
called?
don't even remember what it was called. Somebody let us know in the comments.
Somebody bought it and then kept it going for a little while. There was like a water slide thing there and a couple of hotels, but now I think it's in ruins.
Right.
And I don't know what's going to happen with the Ark encounter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've heard good things. I haven't been there myself. I hope it goes well. I hope it's stewarded well. But
when I was there for the Fight Laugh Feast conference, they ran a very good operation from what I could tell.
Well, and that's good to hear. I just wonder, like, if you have some rich Christians who, pool their money and built a $500 million thing in Vegas, and it's generating tons and tons and tons of money. Like, that's a huge stewardship thing that
You're
we
right.
have not historically handled very well.
Yeah. At least in the last,
Talk about
200
slippery
years.
slopes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Hey,
I think that needs to be considered.
Yeah, gentlemen, I will let you finish the show. I do have to drop for a prior engagement. Thanks for, of course, having me on as always. And
Yes, sir.
Admiral Vogsberg signing off.
See you, John.
We'll see you, John. So I guess
I'm going to milk that for all it's worth.
please do.
Yeah.
So I guess closing thoughts. Yes, that's a stewardship issue,
Mhm.
but we do believe in the indwelling of the Holy Spirit,
Yeah.
and that in and of itself would lead us to believe that it's a possible thing to do. We're not talking about the love of money, right? We're not talking about get rich quick schemes or something like that. I think you mentioned the Jim Baker thing. I think one of the issues there was like Jim Baker. Well, he claims to be a pastor.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe that's something that someone who is a pastor shouldn't be doing. Right.
No,
In terms of venture capital, like you used to be involved in some real estate stuff when you were more bivocational.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing, I think. But maybe like the large scale venture capital stuff, maybe that's something that theologians should maybe shy away from and let other people who specialize in that do that.
Yeah, but there's got to be a synergy, right? Between
Oh yeah,
everything
Yeah.
has to be shepherded by the church in
Yes.
some way or another. Like,
Yes.
there's got to be that accountability, because the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil,
Yes.
right? And I think somehow, like, the role of the pastor in relation to the role of the businessman, businesswoman, venture capitalist, who might try to do some kind of really huge Christian entertainment thing.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to have the church's help. We've got to have the pastor's help
Yes.
to make sure that is promoting the kingdom, is gospel centered, even still, and even if it's just in terms of this is a place where Christians can go and enjoy family friendly entertainment.
Right.
That's got to be shepherded, and it should not revolve around a pastor or a personality, because we all know that's where the wheels come off every time almost.
Right. The Joel Osteen 7 Wonders of Las Vegas. Resort and theme park. That would not that well, that shouldn't go over well, but it wouldn't go over well,
No.
especially in the long run. But yes, you are right. Like those businessmen should be in submission to their elders
Yeah.
biblically, and if an elder catches wind of what's going on here, then there should be a legitimate conversation with accountability. Absolutely.
Well, and and I know, like, I bring up the name T.D. Jakes, and I know there's just huge doctrinal biblical problems with that guy. But here's a guy who's tried to venture in, beyond pastoring into like movies,
Mhm.
music. He even talks about himself as more of an entrepreneur than he does a pastor. And I think things, like, I haven't sorted this out in my mind.
Mhm.
I'm almost thinking out loud here. Things get squishy there.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure what the solution is, but I love the idea. I love the idea of a Christian business people with a lot of money being able to do something like that. I just remember the days of when I was in this circle of people that wanted to talk about marketplace ministry. Like they,
Right.
and it got too secular. It got too carnal. We tried to spiritualize things that weren't. I don't know. I like the idea.
Yeah,
I just
well, I
wonder
mean,
how we flesh it out.
Yeah, I think Christians have shied away too much. It's the pendulum swing.
Mm-hmm.
We go from prosperity gospel, like the Osteens, the T.D. Jakes, all that garbage, and then you swing over to like a Francis Chan, David Platt. I have to sell my house and go live in the sticks in Southeast Asia somewhere, and be a missionary. And those are your only two options, and it's not. You have all manner of characters in the Bible who were righteous with their wealth and with incredible amounts of wealth. Like Abraham funded an army.
Yeah.
You have Job, who was absolutely loaded. Even Jesus's ministry, like, yes, Jesus didn't own a house that we know of.
Right.
But apparently there was enough money to warrant a treasurer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it didn't work out well for that guy, but but the Bible's okay with wealth. It's simply what's the priority in how we use it, and well, that's really it. What's our priority in using it?
Well, it's interesting. Mary and I started reading through Ecclesiastes.
And you talk about someone who's loaded, right?
Yeah, somebody's loaded. Somebody who had, it'd be a whole nother conversation, the amount of women Solomon had. But riches, wealth, women, wisdom.
Yep.
Solomon's got everything.
Yep.
And yet,
all starting with W.
Exactly.
Are we Southern Baptist now?
Well, I have. Again, I haven't read Ecclesiastes in a long time, but Mary and I are about halfway through it, and I've been talking with her about what it might be like to teach through it if we did it. But he keeps coming back to this idea. It's interesting. He says, I see that there's nothing better than for men to eat and drink and enjoy their labor in the fear of God. Like it's like he just keeps coming back to that, because when you take, this is what we do, right? Is we eat, we drink, and we labor. And in so doing, we earn, and there's some measure there as to how much we might earn compared to someone else. But he just keeps coming back to that, because it's like, if you have nothing and you don't enjoy what you have, it's vanity. Right. But then if you have everything and you think you just need more, it's all vanity.
Yep.
So just eat, drink, labor with joy in the fear of God. Like, I don't know, man. It's an interesting book of the Bible.
It would be a really interesting, and this is a side note, an interesting teaching series would be Ecclesiastes in parallel with the Proverbs.
That's what I'm sort of stewing on right now, is like, how would you teach through it? Like, this is a whole nother conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that it's a book of the Bible that I think you can teach it expositionally. But I don't know that it looks exactly like what we're doing in Hebrews, where we take 5, 6, 7, 8 verses and just sort of let's chew on that bite
Mm-hmm.
and chew it well. I don't know that it looks like that because there is a repetitiveness to it.
Right.
But that's I don't know. I'm stewing on that.
Yeah, I
right
mean,
now.
because you basically have, you could almost think of it as Proverbs is the law rightfully applied, like that proper third use of the law all the way through,
Yeah.
and then Ecclesiastes is it's ignored,
Mm.
right? The third use of the law ignored, or even the first and second use of the law, like it's vanity if you're doing these kind of anyway.
Well, I think Proverbs it's the way life typically works, right?
Right.
That's the basis of a proverb. This is typically the way things go.
Yep.
But there is something to learn about God and about the glory of God in that,
Yeah.
in and of itself. Is
Yeah.
that if you sow, you will reap.
Right.
That's the way life typically works. There's something to be learned about God and about His glory in that.
Yep.
And so that wisdom literature is it's fascinating to me.
Yes. Yes. Read more wisdom literature.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Any other thoughts?
I'm hungry.
Me too. Me
It's
too.
noon.
I need to eat.
Afternoon.
Yeah. It's, what is it, 12:11? Yeah, past my lunchtime. Go love God, love your neighbor, makes music. Go start a business on the strip. We'll see you next time.